What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and welcome back to another episode of What the Heck Happened at Friday Night Magic. Now, if you haven't figured it out by the title of this video, what I played at Friday Night Magic this week was a Mono Black Burn, also known as Dark Burn. And there are a couple different variants of this deck. What I'm playing is what's known as the Rogue variant, and not Rogue as in off meta, but rogue as in rogue tribal. But before we get any further, guys, if you enjoy the content that I create, if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And with that out of the way, let's get into the deck list. All right, so this is a pretty fun deck to play, though it can be kind of slow. It's a lot of sorcery speed stuff, so not a lot, pretty much no interaction on your opponent's turn. There are a couple cards that you can play on your opponent's turn or activate on your opponent's turn. Um, but generally the main crux of the deck is all sorcery speed stuff. So yeah, we're gonna get into the deck list right now. I'll also be kind of going over how the various matchups went. So definitely stick around to the end of the video for that. So in my creature pile, I got 4 Prickly Bogarts, which is a pretty good card for the deck as it is a 1/1 with Fear and costs 1 mana, so can't be blocked except by black creatures and artifact creatures. And then we got 4 copies of Night Market Lookout, which this is a really fun card because when it becomes tapped, you drain your opponent for 1. So even if after attackers they decide to either block or kill this creature in some way, you still get that 1 point of damage in while also gaining 1 point of life, which can be pretty pivotal in some games. So we got 4 of those, and then I'm also running 2 copies of Ghoul Draz Vampire. Now this card is really great late in the game, though playing it early, it will probably just die pretty quickly as it is just a 1/1. Though if our opponent has 10 or less life, which we can get them there decently quick. They it this vampire gets +2/+1 and then gets intimidate, so basically has fear, kind of like our prickly Bogart, and it will be a 3/2 fear, which is pretty good. But I'm only running 2 of them because it's a much better late game play after our opponent has kind of played out their hand. And that's all I got for creatures. So I got 4 Hopeless Nightmares here, which is a pretty good spell for the deck as it is basically a shock and makes them discard. So pretty awesome. This card actually does a lot, and then when it goes to the battlefield, we get to scry 2. And you has an activated ability of 2 generic mana and a black, and you get to sacrifice it. And you can do that at instant speed, so we can do this on our opponent's end step or during our upkeep, whatever is the most beneficial at the time. If you have 3 mana available, you're definitely going to want to do this on your opponent's turn. But if you had tapped out during your turn, a decent play, especially if later in the game or in the middle of the game when you have more lands on the field, doing it on your upkeep before your draw step is pretty good as it then allows you to make sure that your draw isn't going to be a dead one or you can, get the card that you want on top. All right. And then we got 4 copies of Okiba Reckoner Raid. And this is a saga. Technically, it is 4 more creatures in the deck, though we don't get that creature for a couple turns. So for 1 black, you get to drain your opponent for 2 turns for 1, and then on the third turn, it becomes a 2/2 menace, so also has some evasion, which it is also a rogue, and all the creatures here are rogues, if you haven't realized that by now, which synergizes with one of the mainstays in the deck. And then I'm running 1 copy of Nihil Spellbomb in the main, is cards that play out of the yard like Tolarian Terrordex can be kind of a bit much for us to deal with, especially with that Ward 2. So making sure we are prepared for them during game 1 is pretty important. So I got 1 Nihil Spellbomb in the main board. This also we can just use to draw a card, so it's not bad in that way. And then into our sorceries. So we got Fruit of Tyzirus, which is a great card. We're only running one of them. It is basically a shock, but it also has escape. So as long as we have a bunch of cards in our graveyard, we can pretty much do this for 4 mana every single turn. You have to exile 3 other cards, but we do play a lot of spells, so it's really not that hard. And then I'm also running 3 copies of Sign in Blood, which we can. This has a lot of versatility. We can use it on ourselves to draw more cards. We can also use it on our opponent as a way to finish them off at the end of the game, since you also lose 2 life. And this is, you can target any player with this, so that can be pretty nice. And then we also got 4 copies of Morsel Theft, and this is why we are on a Rogue Tribal build. So, this has a Prowl cost, which is a pretty old ability at this point. I don't know if we've really seen a resurgence of Prowl in any set or any block since this. Well, we don't really do blocks anymore. This was still printed during a time when we were doing blocks. Alright, so for 1 generic and a black, you can cast this card for its Prowl cost if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with a rogue, and that's why we're all on rogue, so we can play this card for 2 mana instead of 4 mana. Then target player loses 3 life, and you gain 3 life, and if the prowl cost is paid, you can draw a card. So this is pretty much the entire reason we are running a bunch of rogues. And then we also got 4 copies of Sovereign's Bite, another burn spell, and 4 copies of Bump in the Night, which is probably our favorite burn spell here since it also has flashback, so we can do it more than once. Then there's also 4 copies of Soul Reap. And this card is pretty interesting because it's not only a removal spell, but it is also a burn spell as well, as long as we have cast one more black spell before this. So it destroys target non-green creature, which there are definitely, it's not going to hit that Avenging Hunter. But there's not a lot of green creatures being played currently, so it's going to hit pretty much most anything. And then you can also have them lose 3 life if you say you've played like one of your creatures, a Hopeless Nightmare, and a Keep a Reckoner raid, or a Bump in the Night, for example. You can do that on turn 3, which is pretty nice, so you can kind of control the board as well as burning your opponent a little bit more. And then we got 4 copies of Tyrant's Choice. And Will of the Council cards, I'm not really sure how I feel about them being in constructed, as they definitely seem to be more designed for a multiplayer environment. However, we can take full advantage of this card and just vote for its second mode and make our opponent lose 4 life. So it's a good card to kind of close out the game with. And then in our man base, we got 17 lands. I got 1 copy of Bojuka Bog, 1 Piranha Marsh. We got 3 copies of Rakdos Carnarium so that we can replay our Piranha Marsh or Bojuka Bog, as well as making sure we hit red mana for flashing back our Bump in the Night. And then the rest is just 12 basic swamps. Now, in the sideboard, we got a lot of interesting tech in here. So I got 1 copy of Spinning Darkness. Sometimes you just need to gain some life. This is also a removal spell, so that can be pretty good. Also got 2 copies of Trespasser's Curse. This can be very good against a lot of decks that run a lot of creatures, as it just drains our opponent faster if they are playing lots of creatures, and also helps us survive a little bit. Can also shut down certain combo decks, like kind of basically makes familiars lose the game, especially if they're going for the infinite bird loop, or just turns off their infinite life, as well as basically making it so Mogwarts cannot do their thing, which are 2 of the bigger combo decks in the meta. Doesn't do a lot against Walls combo, but it is still a very good tech against both those combo decks, and is okay against Koldatha. I did have a matchup against them, which I will get into in a little bit. I did play this card, but it didn't really seem to matter with the amount of damage that they could throw at me. So and then we got 1 copy of Whale of the Nim. Definitely a little bit of a pet card from my childhood. Um, this has 2 modes. You can basically sweep the board for toughness 1 creatures, or you can regenerate each creature you control. So I kind of like the versatility of this. It does have entwine, so if you want to do both, you have to pay for mana, but it can be a sweeper or a way to protect your own game plan, especially if you want to make sure that you are able to play the prowl cost of our certain card. And then we also got one copy of Duress, which is always a good spell to bring in against the control matchups. One dry spell. So this it's a one damage sweeper, but it also hits both players. And since we are a burn deck, we want to get rid of their life total as quickly as possible. Okay, and then we got three more Nihil spell bombs. Tolarian Terror decks, especially Dimir Terror, is a pretty tough matchup. I have been able to beat them in the past, and just having some graveyard hate in your sideboard is always pretty much a good thing. So I got three more copies of those spell bombs, and then I also got two copies of Fairy Macabras, which are really good against, like I think I have said in previous videos that where I have these cards in the sideboard. This card is very good against the combo decks. So you can, especially against like Flicker loops, you can just get rid of Flicker, or you can get rid of, a Putrid Goblin while the ability is on the stack. So if it's a persist creature, you can just exile it from the graveyard. So that is pretty sweet. And then I got four copies of Geth's Verdict, which is a removal spell while also being a burn spell in itself since the opponent loses one life. And that's the list, guys. Now let's get into the matchups. So my first match of the night was against Koldatha Red, and it was pretty much no contest against Koldatha Red. That deck was so fast. I mean, to be fair, my opponent also got some very good draws. Like they basically got the perfect draw. If they were maybe on, say, an off draw, we maybe could have snuck a game in, but that deck I think is just way too fast for us. It's also the fact that we're not very interactive, which I think I might want to change that about this deck to have some more interaction or just some more instant speed sweepers. Instant speed sweepers are definitely, I think, the thing to do against Koldatha, and unfortunately, I haven't really messed around with this deck in probably several months at least, or at least a couple months. I probably not since the Eldraine set when I brought in the Hopeless Nightmares, which that card definitely added a lot to the deck. So I did lose 1-0 games against Koldatha. They 2-0'd against me, so that match was pretty tough. The second match of the evening, I actually got the bye, so I didn't play anyone for the second round. So I got at least one match win out from the bye, which isn't something I'm always excited about because I do come to the event to play Magic. So when we have an odd number of people like we did that night, someone is always going to have to sit out for one of the rounds. This time it ended up being me. And for the final match of the evening, I played Turbo Fog, which that was a very long match. We actually got two games in, though, which was pretty wild. Though technically, we were a turn away from finishing the second game because we did go to turns and we ran out of time. And I actually would have won game two if if we didn't run out of time, but unfortunately when at that point we wouldn't have time to play the tiebreaker, so I did lose that match just because they did win the first game. I think they were at over 50 life or something. Like it was something ridiculous with all the weather, the storms, that there's just no way for a burn deck to really compete with that. So not to mention, they did get they did mill me in the first game, and they happened to, I think, have milled both my pieces of Graveyard Hate that I have in the main deck. So at that point, and the game had been going on for a while, then I just decided to scoop because I knew there was no way that I was going to win, and I figured it'd be better to just get on to game two. And in game two, we sideboarded in a bunch of Graveyard Hate against them, and it went really well. I got to a point in that game where I had basically exiled all of their Weather the Storm. So there was going to be no more Weather the Storm going on. They still had plenty of fogs left in their deck. Obviously, they still had their card that mills you. So that was still going to happen. However, it did get rid of a bunch of AKs as well. Got rid of a majority of their deck because I saw all four Nihil spell bombs. Also, it played Bojuka Bog a couple times because I got to bounce it with our Rakdos Carnariums. So they didn't really have much of a deck left. So we would have. I got them down to one life before time had run out and when we had reached the limit of turns after the timer has gone out. So didn't actually get to win, though we would have if there wasn't a timer. And then on game three, who knows what would have happened. So first game was a win for Turbofog, and second game was a draw. So they did win that match. So we didn't win any matches with this game. All in all, the event was as fun as it always is. There is just a really wonderful group of people that go to the Friday Night Magic to play Pauper, and it's always a joy to hang out with them, turn cards sideways, and just have some fun. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Of course, I will have a link to this deck in the description if you want to check it out. And if you have any thoughts on this type of list, if you have played it before, and maybe you have some thoughts on how it could be improved, would definitely love to hear your thoughts about that in the comments section below. As always, I would hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time.